Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. Super excited to have Felicia Shakiba with us today, the founder and CEO of CPO Playbook and the host of the CPO Playbook podcast. Felicia, welcome to the show. Super excited to have you.
I am absolutely honored to be here, Kip. This is so wonderful. I'm excited to chat. I think it's going to be a great conversation.
Oh, awesome. Well, good. Well, I usually kind of start out with, just kind of your origin story, almost like a comic book, issue one. Just who are you and how did you come to be doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, great question. I mean, how much time do we have on the show? Well, I will, tell the short story for you and your listeners. So I grew up in a household of my father, who was an entrepreneur, and he had his own manufacturing business. I had three sisters. There was a lot to juggle in our family, and
Okay.
he was gone a lot. I didn't see him too often, and when he was home, he was working. And sometimes we would go to the office, and as a young girl, I would run through the halls and say hi to everybody who's there, and people would say hi to me, and then we would go overseas, and it was a manufacturing business, and so I would run through the halls in the manufacturing plant, and there was he was in retail, so we were not retail, like he was manufacturing, selling to retailers, clothing,
Okay.
and I would run through those halls and look at all the sewing machines, and it was really noisy, and
Uh-huh.
everybody would be so excited to see this little child like running around, and it was exciting for me because I got a lot of attention, being that young, and I'd really just I didn't understand what was happening, what was going on. I thought this was like a normal thing growing up. As I grew up and went to school and learned more about business in general, I was the closest, obviously, to my dad in understanding what business looks like and feels like. And I got a front row seat to the impact and the toll it has on leadership on a personal level, on a professional level. And I was just wondering, how do I help my dad through these things, these very troubling things, what leaders stay up at night thinking about. And I really just wanted to dedicate myself to learning how to make it easier for my dad to run his business and he would be happy. So that's kind of the story. And then I ended up going to school for my for industrial organizational psychology. So I'm a psychologist in that way.
Okay.
And I fell absolutely head over heels when I was in my statistics class.
Really?
Because yes, I did, because it was mind blowing to me to see the soft variables of people in
Mm.
a quantitative way. And it blew my mind. And I just thought I was good at math and I understood math well. And people are so complex. I mean, there is no two people exactly the same. I actually have identical twins and I can verify
Oh,
that
really?
there are
Wow.
no two people exactly the same. Yeah, exactly. So with that being said, I just thought this is the biggest math problem in the world of understanding, patterns and correlations and predictions of people and behaviors. And if you can quantify that, that is just gold. And I just fell in love with that. And so I really loved the work, but I didn't end up doing that right away after school. I
Okay.
ended up working inside organizations, small, medium, and large, mostly on a global scale. And I truly understood multiple variations of how businesses work, right? So large 100,000 person multi organizations, and how you're able to drive culture from one section or function of the business to the other. Leadership development, I worked with Center for Creative Leadership and understood what are those methodologies, what are those assessments that you leverage in order to improve leaders. I looked at things from the HR business partner lens, both internally and externally. I looked at stages between businesses that were just starting up to, those that were raising for funding A, B, C, and D, and then, trying to, shrink. And what does
Hmm.
that transformation look like? And also working with different personalities, different levels, different structures. I really feel like my experience has just brought, you want to do something really well, you do it in multiple different environments. And I feel
Hmm.
like I did that. And so when CPO Playbook started, I launched it, oh gosh, years ago as my own consultant with my own business. And
Okay.
now we are doing all of those things with CPO Playbook. And it's just like it's a big honor to be invited into someone's like home, quote unquote,
Sure.
and really get into the details and the unspoken culture and understand what that is to make a difference. And I truly feel like I am one of those people that can do it. And so I continue to try, right? I
Uh-huh.
do the best I can. And if I can do it at the biggest scale possible, which is really supporting private equity and venture capital where they
Sure.
have multiple businesses, I thought, that is where I can really add value, not just one organization at a time, but across organizations and work with variables or factors and constructs that impact all the companies instead of one at a time. So that's
Oh,
kind
very
of
good.
the theory behind that.
Very
Yeah.
good. So what, yeah, obviously you touched on this, but so what is CPO Playbook and what is the business? What do you do?
Yeah.
These
So
companies
CPO
or
Playbook,
portfolios?
we have three different I guess services. One of them is free content with the CPO Playbook podcast.
Sure.
So we started this because I would go from one client to the next, and I constantly would repeat some basic theories, and,
Right.
and I thought, gosh, wouldn't it be great to just hit record and then send this recording to every one of my clients? But it was a trigger, but it wasn't the reason why I started it. I just thought that leaders should have this information. They should,
Hmm.
really be able to leverage this information and learn from others. And it's constant and continuous learning for me, which is what I preach all the time. And so
Yes.
it was just a win-win-win for everyone. And so we have the CPO Playbook podcast. We're at nearly 100 episodes, so we're excited about
Very good.
that.
Congratulations. That's excellent.
Thank you. Almost. We're
Yeah.
almost there, but hopefully by the time people hear this, we'll be at 100, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and then the second offering is really around leadership, which is what I've been talking about so far.
Yeah.
It's executive coaching and executive coaching at scale. And so we offer, I have a Korn Ferry certification background, which is one of just a wonderful, wonderful certification around assessments for leaders.
Okay.
And um, we look at that at leadership and development through a quantitative lens and put together programs that truly make differences for either one-on-ones with leaders for executive coaching, or again, like I said, at scale, so the groups of leaders and those development programs. And then the third service is really around anything for consulting. So
Okay.
it could be our blueprint HR, which is around making sure you have the right HR technology embedded, you have proper leveling guides and compensation tracks. We also have Elevate, which is elevate leaders at every level of the organization and putting together that package. And we
Okay.
also have one-offs where people might need compensation analysis or market adjustment, and we do all that analysis as well. Our newest and most exciting service
Uh-huh.
that we are in the middle of launching is called PIA, which is a portfolio intelligence assessment.
Interesting.
And yeah, this is very interesting. It's very exciting. We are currently working with design partners to really design and build out the service. And what it essentially is, it's two different surveys, one for the private equity or venture capital firm, and the other survey is for the portfolio companies to
Okay.
take. And so we take all of the data from those surveys. We also look at observational data. So while we're working with those teams, we actually are taking notes on what we see from leaders and what we see from employees. We also do, depending on how big the portfolio company is, we do one-on-one interviews. So we collect qualitative data. And
Okay.
then we also collect organizational success metrics, which is like revenue or EBITDA or throughput or customer satisfaction rates.
Mm-hmm.
And we correlate all of that data to tell a story of what are the greatest factors that you can push or pull or you need to leverage in order to really do a value, proper value creation plan. And then once we're able to conclude on what those factors are, we do a rollout communication to the firm, to each portfolio company, and to the employees. So that
Okay.
communication is going all the way through. Everybody knows what those top challenges are, what leadership is going to be focused on in the next 6 months or 3 months to a year, what are the short term and long term goals. And then we put together what is the plan, right? So is it people are feeling undermotivated because they don't feel like they're being paid fairly. And so you're actually paying more for less productivity.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
if that is the case, then we do a market adjustment and we talk about why those adjustments are happening and who those adjustments are happening to and why they're not happening to certain other people, right? So we're clarifying and really tightening communication and making sure that the firm, the leaders of the portcos and the employees are fully aligned. And that alignment, I tell you, Kip, it is so
Yes.
important. It doesn't matter what you do. If you don't have that alignment, you're kind of a sunken ship. And so we make sure that it's not just about the analysis. It's also about alignment and it's about making sure we're hitting the right levers to make the most value. So that's kind of the newest and greatest thing that we're working on
Yeah,
right
that's
now.
incredible, Felicia. That's amazing.
I'm trying. I mean, but honestly, it's just something that I feel like I like saw it, so
Uh-huh.
long ago, and I thought this is just so valuable. But it is really difficult to turn, soft variables into hard ones, into quantitative data. It's very challenging to do it. You have to clean the data. You have to get
Yes.
data integrity. You have to have valid, reliable factors, and and then you have to make sure that the survey itself is actually, appropriate in order
Right.
to measure what you're trying to measure, right? So there's a lot of steps in between in the background that we do, and I can tell you that most companies they think of engagement surveys, right? Engagement
Mm-hmm.
surveys are fantastic. Like
Mm-hmm.
you should have an engagement survey, but it's a survey to measure engagement. It's not to measure organizational success, which is what we're trying to measure, right?
Right.
It's very, very different. So we introduced the PIA to one of our clients, and one of their portfolio companies had already done an engagement survey, but we were trying to explain like this is so different. Like
Uh-huh.
we're not even, I'm like, we've got maybe a few questions, on engagement, which is still important, right? But we're really measuring what does success for a portfolio company look like? And what is leadership success in that type of environment, right? Right? Whether you are owned by a PE firm or you're inside a venture capital firm, what does leadership look like? Because that's a little different than owning your own company, right? There's different
Absolutely.
competencies, there's different levels of maturity, there's different decision making that happens, and understanding how to manage multiple stakeholders at different levels. And there's a risk factor that you could lose your job too, and it's not
Right.
always the case when you're not you don't have investors. So there's just a lot of different variables in that specific environment that we account for. And that's not something like a typical engagement survey would do, but not that it's not, again, it's not that it's not good to have an engagement survey, but it's kind of like, an engagement survey, but it's tenfold measuring much more impactful measures. And, it's like on speed or something. It's just
Uh-huh.
a massive assessment. And it's really, meant to do a lot of the work up front. So you don't have to do all of that searching of where can we add value, or where's the opportunity. That could take companies or firms up to a year to figure out.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah, and we're doing it like all at once up front with as much data as possible. So we know exactly where to put our time.
Yeah. So for you, so how is your over time, and maybe this is a two-parter, just your personal definition of leadership? How has that evolved over time for you? And then what are the principles of leadership that you're teaching or coaching your clients?
Yeah, over time, over time, it really has to do without external factors, right? Like in a time of AI, what does
Right.
leadership look like?
Yes.
Right. So we're evolving. A few years ago, it was around inclusive leadership. That was the new competency. It was
Hmm.
like, if you're not being inclusive, you're not really getting, the right voices in the room. And if you're not getting the right voices in the room, you have poor decision making. Right. And so now we're kind of in, are you, resilient? I think you really
Okay.
have to be resilient and adaptable. I think adaptable more, maybe more so, but AI is like a wrench that got thrown into basic business practices,
Yeah.
and people are swiftly understanding that what made me successful yesterday is not what's going to make me successful today. And the faster leaders take that on and embrace that mindset, I think the easier it will be. But there was a couple of guys who I interviewed on the CPO Playbook podcast, and they were serial entrepreneurs in San Francisco, had sold their company to Workday. And
Okay.
I was asking them, I'm like, what is your, consistent pattern between all of these companies that you've done? And one thing that really stood out for me, it wasn't necessarily what they did. It was the fact that they knew people and were able to engage the same people over every company that
Okay.
they started. So as soon as they wanted a new company, they're like, Joe, Harry, Alice, let's go. And like they already had a team that was ready to rock and roll,
Yeah.
and the team trusted them, right?
Hmm.
So for me, I feel like that translates into trust in leadership. And that is one of the, if you will, like the constructs or the factors that we measure in our PIA analysis, is trusting leadership. And so then your question is, how do you trust leadership, or how do you build trust as a leader, right? For people to follow you, or for people to get behind you when things are down, or for people to stay with you and are loyal when you hit rough patches, right? It's not always going to be up and down, but when you do have those, it's not always going to be up, but when you do have those down moments in a business, you want to know, can you survive? And the way that you survive is if you have people saying, we believe in you. We
Hmm.
believe in what you do as a leader. And I feel like that translates completely. And so what do you do to build trust? I think fairness is such a big factor in this. If you are a leader and you are not practicing fairness, and rigorously, and fiercely loyal to fairness,
Uh-huh.
you will definitely have a hard time.
Hmm.
Sooner or later, you will definitely run into some roadblocks, no matter how loyal or friendly you are with people.
Uh-huh.
That's just the bottom line. And fairness really comes deeply in the core of performance management and pay.
Okay.
And those things are very tied. Those things must be tied together for a high performance culture and
Uh-huh.
to prevent a toxic culture, right? So I think that's really, really huge. But it's not just fairness, right? I mean, people have to trust that you have your eye on the ball. People have to trust that you're innovating, trust that
Hmm.
you're talking to customers and you understand, their pain points, and you have empathy for their pain points and understanding what is the next thing that we need to create or build. And they must to trust that you know how to have the right hiring skills.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you hire someone that just comes in and rips everyone apart and is not a good leader, especially at the leadership level, people are not going to trust that you know how to hire the right people. And so for me, if I was in that situation, which I think I have been before at one or two times, but I think, if this person is my manager and they are being discriminatory or whatnot,
Uh-huh.
how can I trust that even if this person leaves, that the organization is make sure
Right.
that they're not going to hire someone like that
Right.
again? Why should I stay here, right? So I feel like those things are really important. And kind of to your second question, which is like, what am I talking to clients about today? And I mean, I definitely think it's those variables, but
Mm-hmm.
I also feel like executive coaching is it's very unique to each person's development plan. So it's not just a one size fits all. I know a lot of coaches might do that, but it's not what we want. We look at leadership not as a course, but as an understanding where is the business going and then understanding what are the competencies that you have, what are the competencies that you need in order for this business to succeed at this stage, and
Mm-hmm.
then closing those gaps. So every plan for each organization should be different. It should look a little bit different. What you might see that are important factors that are important for variable for leaders in manufacturing plant might be very different than a technology company.
Right.
So it's really specific to the environment that you're in, to the stage of organization, the industry, and what you have now, and how you want to not compensate but complement with other leaders, in order to make that leadership team really whole and healthy.
Yeah, very good. Any like, I don't know, innovative approaches to leadership that you found that have, particularly made a big impact?
Um, I think that there's a lot of understanding how things get done.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example. Um, I hear this all the time between private equity, venture capital firms, and I think about them as leaders too,
Right.
right? I mean,
Right.
they are actually the leaders of
Yes.
the portfolio companies,
Uh-huh.
right? So I listen a lot to the things that they say and then how it gets communicated to Portco leadership. And a lot of it is like numbers, sales, customers, and it should be. I'm not
Uh-huh.
saying you shouldn't. I'm
Uh-huh.
saying that those are all important things, but it is so difficult for leaders to actually put that plan into action when the communication is just that,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like explaining or collaborating or identifying goals that are specific to how you get there is a much deeper, richer conversation around
Yes.
leadership growth. It's not about, putting up a sign or some statistics that just say, here's where we're at, and here's how much more revenue we need to get, and go
Yeah.
get it, Tiger.
Right.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's not a plan. The plan is, okay, here's where we made a lot of our money. What do the customers look like that double down on our services? What stage were they at? What were they thinking? And then moving to, a year later, okay, what is their thinking process now? What does that look like? Do we have the skills and abilities to support the needs of our customers for the future? What are they worried about? I mean, really putting together the story of how are we serving our customers, and then backing into, do we have the talent, knowledge, skills, and abilities to serve the needs of our customers? I mean, you
Mhm.
really have to dig. And if you're the surface level conversation of we need to make more money, that is just not happening, right? So when I think about innovative approaches to leadership, it's like there was an interview I did with the head of executive search at Snap,
Okay.
and he was talking about, well, what kind of, I was asking him, like, what kind of leaders do you look for? And I think he said it best. It was leaders that were able to be strategic and very high level, okay, and communicate and inspire and all those things, but also be able to drill down and understand what are those core things that you need to do, right? Because sometimes, I've definitely seen and heard and been witness where a lot of firms will hire, very high level executives at like from Google
Uh-huh.
or bigger organizations, but they get there and they're very smart people, but they get there and they just don't know how to drill down. I mean, this is
Uh-huh.
not, like a giant organization where you have to stay high level, and if you don't, you're going to sink. But rather understanding that if you are in a portfolio company, you still have to have both of those, both the strategic and the ability to dive deep when it's appropriate, and understanding when it's appropriate is also really important.
Hmm.
And with who, and having the right voices in the room, and not wasting people's time if they're not, if that's not the meeting they should be in, right? So
Right, right.
making sure and understanding how to make those decisions with the right data and the right people in the room, being able to stay high level, but also drill down when needed. I mean, that's kind of where I think a lot of organizations find more success in leadership.
Uh-huh. Oh, very good. How about you touched a little bit on culture and core values, perhaps around hiring. How involved are you in just that conversation about, the culture of the organization, the core values? Are they hiring, promoting, firing, making decisions based on their core values, and being intentional about creating culture?
So the good firms do that.
Hmm.
The ones that are successful do
Yeah.
that. The ones who are struggling, they can't, if I asked every operating partner, what's your values, they'll say, I'll say something different, right? And it's not like a blame on them. It's just that there's a lot going on. And I think that understanding how to um, know what to keep your eye on and what not to keep your eye on is important. And one of those things is definitely values. You don't have to recite a poem on each value, but
Uh-huh.
you have to know what the term is, and you should really know what it means, and then you really should know what it looks like behaviorally. And
Mm.
if you don't know what those things are, you're a little bit in trouble, because you can't recognize the value when you are searching for executives and leaders, or you can't reward the value if you have a leader and they're performing that behavior or not. So I think knowing what the term is, knowing what terms are not as valuable is also important. Um, but having alignment on what those values are, and that in that sense I'm talking about not just everybody knowing what they are and what those behaviors look like and how they show up at every level in the business, but also are they tied to rewards and recognition, and that has to
Yes.
do with the appropriate pay and compensation, and recognition in front of your peers and even sometimes your family members is really important,
Uh-huh.
because that is what continues someone to behave that way, right? Um, if you think you have values, and your people are saying, I feel like I am bending over backwards and not getting compensated,
Uh-huh.
then that's where you can find out if you have a break in the line, in the direction and alignment. So that's a trigger. That's a piece of it. But as far as values go, it's really important for any organization, PE or VC, to make sure that every portco knows what those values are
Hmm.
from the firm level. And then there may be unique values in between portcos, right?
Sure,
But let's
sure.
say you have like three values from the private equity or venture capital firm. Let's say it's like, I don't know, trust, innovation, customer focus,
Uh-huh.
right? And so then you want to look, let's say you have 10 portcos. Every one of those portcos should still embody those values, but maybe three or four other ones that are unique to their business, and that makes sense. And
Hmm.
all of those values should be implemented both in the hiring process and the performance review. And if you're not doing it, or if you're not doing it often, there's a break. So
Uh-huh.
it can break in so many ways. People talk about culture and values often and how they're the key. that's great. But if you don't do it right, if you don't
Right.
implement it properly, and if you're not consistently moving it forward or catching those breaks, like for example, your onboarding process. I see it all the time. Like your onboarding process is like, okay, here's your computer, here's this. I'm like, that's your
Yes.
technical onboarding
Right.
process. What about all the rest of the more important stuff that you need to be implementing in your onboarding? And so, one of the other things that we're also exploring is designing onboarding for leadership for new portfolio companies, which I think is super, super key because this is such a mess that I've seen in other firms where they just, they're like, oh yeah, we bring the CEO on and we talk to him for about a year. I'm like, that's your onboarding process?
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
like, oh boy. Okay, okay. So just for your listeners, and I think that a great onboarding process is actually starts at pre-boarding. Right.
Hmm.
So pre-boarding, you are learning everything you obviously can about the business, about the individual, about all the leaders at the top, not just the CEO, but also the CEO's team,
Hmm.
executive team. And the onboarding is starts at pre-boarding and it's with all the leadership. And also making sure you have the right leadership, right? And are they the right leaders for moving forward? But if they are and you're moving forward and you end up investing in that company, then it's really about aligning on values, aligning on processes, right? How are we going to implement those values? That's process.
Uh-huh.
And how are those things, what is the differentiators or unique things that are going to be for the portfolio company versus the firm? And making sure that, okay, how do we measure this? How do we calculate it? How do we make sure that it's going to continue this way? And that has to do with making sure that you have the right definitions and behaviors that are linked to performance reviews. And so when people do look at performance reviews and they're looking at not just the leadership, but also the rest of the organization, that is, as long as there is, it's connected to compensation and it's defined appropriately, it's measured appropriately. That's when you have that alignment, and then you can trust your data that you're seeing. I mean, I know tons of, organizations that are like bringing data that they don't know if the data is clean, right? It's like it's
Uh-huh.
like this is the data you're sharing with your
Yeah.
firm. Okay, let's start over. I mean, constantly, even in just deploying the PIA, the surveys, we do an extra step and we want the highest participation rate ever. So we're constantly saying, okay, you have, 50 people in production, only 4 people or 5 people have taken it this week. But if you do it another way, and you say, okay, you have 5 people, in your office, and like let's say customer service, 5 people in customer service, and you have 6 people who responded that they were in customer service.
Yeah. Right.
Your data is dirty. And if
Yes.
your data is dirty, then imagine what other data that you have that's dirty, right? There, it just becomes this like peek into, if this is not right, what else is not right? And how are you calculating things? Are you doing it consistently? Like, who's doing it, right? So all of this data piece that is really just the first step. And again, like if you're trying to link it to values and culture, it's like you really have to be super like just regiment on how you collect and validate data in order to get it right, to report it properly. And then you can also start, looking at, okay, how are we going to implement values and culture? A lot of the values and culture, that is super driven by leadership. There's just no doubt. I mean, you talk
Mm-hmm.
about performance, you can talk about compensation, but if all of those things are working and your leader is not behaving in alignment with those values, good luck, my friend. I have no other words for you, but the leaders also need to be accountable. And I see this so often where the leaders are promoting, oh, these are the values and these are, what we're supposed to do. And then the leadership is saying, well, I don't need to take the performance review. I'm the CEO. And I'm
Right.
like, you're the
Yep.
number one person that actually must take that
Right.
performance review in order for us to have any really clue in what's going on in your organization. And if we don't know, we can't help you. Right. So I think that leaders truly need to it's not about the performance review. It's about what you are doing in front of other people and what you're not doing in front of other people.
Uh-huh.
That's a huge part of it, right? So if you are bringing certain people into your decision table and you're leaving one leader out all the time, what does that say to how the rest of your organization makes decisions, right?
Uh-huh.
It's just a really big piece of the puzzle. And if you don't, if I'm a leader in any organization, just pretend you're being followed by a spotlight. And
Uh-huh.
if you can pretend that you're being followed by a spotlight, you'll be a much more aware of your actions and your behaviors, more so than you would be before. But that is truly the way it is. And again, it's not just about what you're doing, it's about what you're not doing, what you're not saying, if you didn't reply to that email, that might be really important. The length of time between your not responding to the second response, that
Yes.
is huge. It's so big because
Yes.
I know this because I speak to employees all the time, and sometimes their complaints is like, I sent this email out, but didn't hear back. So I was just waiting on my leader's decision, and, this fell through. It's like, well, we should look at and that is just a host of problems, right? That's like your system that you're using. Is it your technology? Is it your relationship with the leader? Is it the fact that you wrote you know the wrong question, or is it the lack of one-on-ones that you don't that
Mhm.
are not in your your weekly plan? Is it, there's just so many things that can go into that, and you look at it from so many different levels, but at the end of the day, that's the problem, right? If you're not getting the responses or the answers that you need, and that's just one piece of it. If you're seeing that one behavior happen all the time, imagine what else is happening, right? That's should be happening. So there's a lot of little cues that you can pick up on to have a good idea, or have a good inference on what may or may not be happening in the organization.
Sure. How involved are you in thinking about or helping your clients think about just their strategy to attract? When you talk about building high performance teams, to
Mhm.
attracting and then retaining high performance leaders within the firm or within the port call.
How is what's the strategy, or
Yeah, I
how
mean, are you
involved
are
am I?
you are you as part of your work, are you helping organizations and leaders think through what is the strategy to attract high performers from Google or other places to come here, and then how do we keep them?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Again, it has a lot to do with fairness. Your employee value proposition is really what we're talking about here.
Okay.
So it's really about what are you selling to employees to be there? That's right.
Yes, you're right.
So your employee value EVP is what we call it, or employee value proposition, and it has a lot to do with not how you present yourself to candidates, but it's how you present yourself to your current workforce.
Uh-huh.
So if you think about it, if things are not going well internally, it's going to be 10 times harder to present that through interviews, through screenings and recruitment, through reaching out to others, uh, fixing your Glassdoor rating or your LinkedIn posts from your company. You're able to get many more referrals from your current employees that enjoy working there,
Yes.
right? And so if you ever want to think about recruitment or scaling your business or attracting top talent, it's not about having the greatest places to search. That's
Right.
actually a different piece, but it's actually about how well are you treating your current employees?
Uh-huh.
Again, fairness, big one, culture, values, all pay fairness and equity, how we make decisions, trust in leadership, ability to adapt. All of those things employees are constantly looking at,
Yeah.
and pretending you have a spotlight. Those are all the things that you need to do, which is really, do we have a great workplace? Yes or no? And that really, I feel like that comes with an engagement survey, is really understanding the quantity of that as how engaged people are. And that's really a great way to use the engagement surveys to say, okay, if we want to improve our employer value proposition, we want to look at, why are people engaged? Why are people not engaged? Why do people like it here? Do they have a best friend here? Did their best friend leave? Did we recently have a layoff and their friends were like gypped and only given 1 month severance? I
Uh-huh.
don't want, like those are the conversations that come up when you are thinking about staying or attracting new talent. And so again, it's about, how happy are your current employees is the first place I would start. And I'm
Yeah.
definitely, those are things that we are 100% involved in, and helping them, steer and navigate what that looks like, and what's the process, and what how fast do we want to move,
Uh-huh.
things like that, about strategy and retaining and attracting talent.
Yeah. How about, I mean, going a step further, just allowing for opportunities for the ongoing growth and development of your current employees? Maybe speak a little bit about
So
that.
important. So important. If I were to think about one thing to increase engagement, it would be professional growth and career development. You
Yes.
you can't get there without career tracks and compensation fairness and performance fairness, because
Uh-huh.
you
Uh-huh.
can't. So I talk a lot about those foundational things, but at the end
Yes.
of the day, that is the goal, is professional growth and career development. Because if that's not your goal, you're not growing people, you're not growing the business, period. So with that in mind, people are looking at, how can I grow my career? And there is, you know, I think from an employee perspective, they're not really thinking about the leadership perspective. There's two different ones, right? So the leader is thinking about, how do I grow my business? How do I get more customers? How do I get more revenue? The employee is thinking about, I'm doing a great job. Why shouldn't I move up? And those things are truly need to be tied together. And in fact, communication is not there. Again, there's a break, right? So there's a break in alignment. And I think when you look at professional growth and career development, the communication really needs to be around, um, when the business is successful, then we have a bigger need for more responsibility. And
Mm.
therefore, you as an individual may have a bigger need for more responsibility. We might need that from you.
Yeah.
So it's not enough to be an all-star employee, unfortunately. That's just a reality. You can
Uh-huh.
be the best employee in the world, but I always tell leaders, absolutely do not promote your top IC, your top individual contributor, into a manager
Yes.
if they don't have the training and course in order to leverage management skills in order to do that job, because those are different skills. So if that is the case, then it's really important to make sure that you align, what does promotion look like? So promotion looks like, high performance, and within performance, it's values, it's hitting your values, hitting your goals, and hitting your competencies. Okay, it's threefold. That's performance. That's individual performance. And then there's organizational performance, which is, do we have a need for that role? I mean, we're not promoting you because you want it. We have to promote you because we have a need in the business,
Mm.
and you're an all-star employee. And the third component is readiness.
Uh-huh.
So if you're not ready, right? So it's like, let's say the role, you're an all-star performer, though we do have an opening, but the opening is in China.
Right.
Okay, we're not ready to move to China.
Uh-huh.
But or whatever the case is, right? Or the opening requires 50% travel. Well, I'm not ready for that.
Uh-huh.
So there's these multiple components, multiple factors. And then in addition to that, if you are ready, you should already be showing competency, like that you are performing at the competencies for that role. So a
Mm.
lot of organizations are saying, okay, we want to promote you, and now you're going to learn the competencies for the next level.
Right.
Wrong.
Nope.
Very wrong. So let me explain. So you want that person, it's almost like oh my gosh, I can't remember the word, but it's like emerging leaders. Emerging
Okay.
leaders. You
Okay.
should have an emerging leaders program that allow, and this is anywhere from like 30 employees. It doesn't have to be a lot of employees. You can still have a program like this in small organizations, but you
Hmm.
have an emerging leaders program that basically says, if you are interested and in leveling up and learning more, you're going to go to a 1, 2, 3 year program. And that could look like just managers getting together once a quarter. It could mean having a mentor. It could be understanding what the competencies are and then, spending 10%, 20% of your time learning what those competencies are and practicing them, right? There's just different levels of ways to do that. But at the end of the day, this emerging leaders program should allow someone to reach the next level of competencies. So when you are ready for that opening and the organization is saying, we need somebody as a head of operations to bake out this new whatever, then you're like, okay, this person already has these competencies. We don't need to go look for someone outside the organization that already has these competencies, right?
Uh-huh.
We have someone already, they're ready to rock, and then they're able to perform well. But if you prematurely promote someone either because you don't want to lose them or because they're an all-star IC, I mean, that's just, not good practice, unfortunately. It will, you're setting that person up for failure, and then you've lost a great, fantastic IC. And people need to, individuals need to think of it that way too. Unfortunately, it's a little more complicated than most people think, but
Uh-huh.
um, but that is a beautiful way to promote someone. You're setting them up for success. The organization is in dire need of them to get to that level. Then that person has gone through that experience of leveling up, and they now have the knowledge to mentor the next person, right? I mean, it just trickles
Yes.
down. And those are best practices those are things that build the culture, and that starts with leadership. There's no way that, there's no way that if leadership is not on board with that process, that they're going to do it. And if they're not going to do it, the next level of leaders aren't going to do it, and so forth, right? So there needs to be strong alignment and an encouragement to do it that way from the top.
So true. How about are there any unique, you talk about just working in the private equity VC space with their portcos, any unique aspects to your work or to, helping to build leaders and teams in the environment of being a portco within private equity or venture capital?
I mean, I think I feel like the biggest thing that stands out is adaptability,
Mm,
for me. And maybe that will change tomorrow. I don't know. But,
right.
it's, I
Got to be
think that
adaptable.
exactly. Exactly. Uh, I think adaptability is so important. And it's not about just being willing to adapt. It's about knowing when to adapt and knowing
Okay.
when not to adapt,
Mm,
right? Because um, first, there's specific ways that a PE or VC will operate, and those are the things you probably need to do, right? I mean, they've been doing this for a long time. You've allowed them to invest in your business. They are a stakeholder. You have to have some sort of leniency into some of the things that they want from you. So, as a leader of a portco, you have to be able to adapt to those things. In another way, I think that when you are making decisions, and this is different, right? It's going from you as a CEO to now you with five other stakeholders at a board meeting or whatnot, and having to come together. I think being adaptable about how you present and influence others is also something that is a competency that needs to get built and exercised in a better way. I mean, we were just talking about promotions. It's like it's better
yes.
to exercise that competency before you get an investment,
Right.
because once you're there, that whole scenario changes, that dynamic changes, and it's understanding how to influence others on the board is really important. So one board member might be more influenced through data. Another board member might be better influenced through relationships.
Mm.
How do they want to be presented with data? Do they want more concise answers, more to the point answers? Do they want to, maybe learn more about your process and understand how you got there? And then how do you present all of that and influence others both before the meeting, before the board meeting, and during the board meeting and after the board meeting? And that's also important, right? It's not just about presentation at the board meeting.
Mm.
Um, and then being able to softly get buy-in, before and kind of what is the word? Like I guess that's the same thing. Like softly get buy-in before you actually present, making sure that, hey, I'm thinking about this. What are you thinking? Do you think this is a good idea? Do you think this is what this is what I'm leaning towards? What are your thoughts? Preparing for all of the pushback is also
Uh-huh.
important, knowing what the pushback is going to be. It's kind of like going into a sales pitch, right?
Uh-huh.
Making sure that people understand, what might they say no to, and what is your next option if that's the no.
Uh-huh.
So being super prepared, understanding how to influence others for appropriate decision making, being adaptable. Those are some, and again, what got you here is not going to get you there the
Right.
next day. So knowing that you have to kind of continuously evolve, and that's the same as any organization within a PE or VC environment or not, is that every organization has slightly different needs as you grow. I'll give you a prime example, which I really love. This one is
Sure.
I had a leader who was telling me that when they were having trouble growing. And I was just asking him. He was the head of the plant, and they do some manufacturing. And he's like, well, I have had this, our biggest customer, and they, spend XYZ amount of dollars with us. And, it's the, again, biggest customer. And they call me and they say, hey, I need something fast. So I'm not going to say no to that customer. I'm going to put them at the front of the line because they've been a long time loyal, very high paying customer, and I
Right.
don't want to lose them, right? Now, that is very typical, and I'm not sure if it was the right decision or not.
Uh-huh.
But I will say that I would, then speak to the head of sales, and they're saying, well, there's no shortage of bringing new customers. It's keeping them. And I'm like, why do you think that is? And we're like, we weren't sure. And then we were thinking about it. And I'm like, maybe because after their first or second order, they don't get it on time, because these bigger customers are in the
Yes.
front of the line. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
that would make sense, that would, so how do you balance that? You can't do things the way you've done it before. Maybe that was important when you were just a few employees
Right.
or under 10 or
Exactly.
under 20, maybe, right? You've got one or two giant customers that you depend on. So that makes it important. But now you're growing. You have to do things differently. You're growing in a different industry or a different direction, or you have new services, or, maybe you have to be a little bit more flexible on pricing when you're innovating a new service,
Uh-huh.
things like that. And if you're not thinking about adapting as your organization adapts, you're just not going to grow. And that's just the bottom line. And I'm not saying that was, in this particular case, it was the right or wrong decision. Actually, I would never know, right? This is their
Right.
business. They know it better
Right.
than I do. But what I can say is that I can understand why that might happen. And maybe the reason maybe because we don't know exactly, then the next step is to find out exactly why, that customer experience is not 5 stars, right? So, and verify that that was the good decision or not. But because they don't know if it was, that's the problem,
Yes.
right?
Right.
So, with that being said, again, it has a lot to do with, if you want to grow, you need to adapt. You need to get a new wardrobe, start dressing differently.
Uh-huh.
Maybe eat healthier, streamline some things, and always be questioning and coming to the table with good questions is also a great way to get there, right? It's not saying I don't know. It's saying, how do we understand more so we do make a good
Right.
decision? And how do we bring more, maybe voices into the decision-making table where we haven't heard them before? Maybe you have to start collecting more information from employees that are under you, your direct reports and so forth. So we have a better understanding of what's really happening throughout the organization, right? And that's really what a leader should be doing. I mean, they should be collecting data, quantitative, qualitative, all the time. That's going to help them get them to better decisions, which breeds leadership trust, which holds your employees, which allows you to grow. And that's I feel like I don't think every organization is going to ever do that 100%
Right.
right.
Hmm.
You're never going to do it 100% right. And being okay with that is part of the process. It's part of growing. I'm definitely okay with that in my business. I'm not going
Uh-huh.
to get everything right,
Right.
but I sure am going to get as much data as I can. And I'm going to be okay with making decisions where I don't have all the data either. That's important too, is that you do the best you can, you make the best decisions, fail fast, make sure that you know that if this is the wrong path, that you're able to retract and move in a different direction as quickly as possible. And everything is going to be okay. We're all going to
Yeah.
be okay.
That is called being a leader or an entrepreneur right there.
There you
Yes.
go.
How about, any, I don't know, future trends or opportunities that you're most excited about, and maybe how you're positioning CPO Playbook to capitalize or benefit to those, or even your portfolio clients?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are definitely moving into a more quantitative, data-driven, people analytics world.
Yes.
Um, I have great, great, great friends that had just stand up, some professional groups across the nation, even across the world around doing more around people analytics. It's something that we're trying to do more of with the PIA assessment. We're really excited about that. We're looking for design partners right
Uh-huh.
now. Well, more of them. We've done already some. And so we're really excited about that. We think we have something really special no one else is doing. And to be able to potentially predict success with the assessment, I think is really unique and special. Um, and we have a lot of that experience. And so again, I think it's around making sure that leaders, VCs, operating partners, and PE firms are more data driven around people strategy, which helps both internally and externally about finding and retaining and growing talent, which eventually will, bring you rewards in your organization and in your success. So, human capital is the biggest number one expense, and it's
Yes, it
also an
is.
investment, right?
Hmm.
It's also the
Right.
biggest investment in any organization. So, CPOs, chief people officers, I think we hold the cards on a lot of things, but it's all about partnership, and it's about alignment and making sure you guys are all swimming in the same direction. And it's okay if it's the wrong direction, but as long as you're swimming in the same direction, you all figure out that that's the wrong direction together.
Yes.
And again, so I think people and firms should really double down on more quantitative data around assessing organizations and being able to do that, hopefully with us, with the portfolio intelligence
Right.
assessment. And
Yeah.
we're ready. We're so excited. We've gotten our initial data already. And I'm just, twiddling my fingers going, gosh, I've got pots of gold here. What do I do
Yes.
with it?
It's so exciting.
It is. It really is. So we're thrilled. We've got a lot of firms coming up to us and asking more questions about it.
Very
And
good.
hopefully we'll be able to come on the show next year and tell you all about our data. So that's the
Absolutely.
plan.
Yes. How about looking back, Felicia, any decision or action you would say that's been, most pivotal to your success so far?
I think just practicing what I preach.
Okay.
I mean, it's really easy to tell other people what to do.
Right.
It's much harder to do it myself. I'm a
Hmm.
business owner. I have a team that I lead, and I often, if I'm struggling or I'm in a pickle, I ask myself, what would I tell myself? You know?
Uh-huh.
I go, oh yeah, I need to do that, you know. Um, and and uh and so I truly, do my best to practice the things that I share with others. And I'm also like my own case study, if you will, So
Yeah,
I'm also like looking at, does this really work? Does it not? When does it work? When doesn't it? And so I'm constantly thinking, and I think continuous learning is really the key.
for sure.
So again, it's with the podcast, with my clients, with potential clients, understanding, hey, if we didn't get, if we didn't get the opportunity to support you, why not? What can we do
Hmm.
better? And just having that humility, I think, is so critical, important. And because when you are successful, you kind of lose it, and being able to be grounded and having humility as a foundation is really important to make sure that you get, kind words from others, even when you mess up or you make a mistake. And I think more and more we are aligning with our potential clients around that particular competency around humility, because we feel like we work really well with clients that have the same level of humility, who are eager to learn, who are eager to understand and partner with us. We are truly a partnership type of firm where we would come in and we're not just going to, put somebody on your account and check off boxes.
Yeah.
It's truly custom. It's truly bespoke. We feel like if we're not involved, we're not giving you the best service or the best outcome. And so we want to be involved. It's more about, we know what we think is great for you, and we want to test it out and learn with you. So it's very much a partnership. And I think that's something that's unique to CPO Playbook.
Uh-huh.
And what we do, our client experience is hopefully, above the 5 stars that you
Uh-huh.
normally
Right.
see. And so that's kind of what we think we bring to the table, and also the innovation. Being at Stanford, we've definitely adopted the design thinking
For
process,
sure.
and that is our method of going to market and with something new and innovative. And I don't think we ever would stop. Like we might have certain services, but I don't think we've ever really stopped evolving each one of those services, because we get better and better every time.
Hmm.
And we're learning, again, back to just continuous learning and making sure our clients feel like they're a true partner.
Yeah. Any advice you would give to young or aspiring entrepreneurs, just to succeed in this today's economic climate and just to succeed as a business owner or an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think, I would say that one of the things that is surprising during my entrepreneurial journey is I actually had a startup, a tech startup, long time ago. It obviously didn't work, but I probably learned more during that time than I would
Totally.
ever learn in my
I
lifetime.
believe it.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody believes it, because it does happen. Um, I actually learned a skill that I never thought I would. And I learned how to design. I was not a designer.
Interesting.
I was, I know how to use Figma, and we do all of our artwork in Figma and all of that, because I've been able to train my employees on how to use the tool and all of those things. But I think you know, being brave enough to learn something you have no intention or had no intention of learning
Uh-huh.
is scary, but also one of the greatest rewards, because you just become another superhuman in order
Mm.
to do something different and new. And I would just say, leverage AI.
Yes.
ChatGPT is your friend. The
Hmm.
ChatGPT is your CMO, your CFO, your, all of those things.
Yes.
Uh, Learn it as well as you possibly can, and leverage it to learn new things and to be brave enough to move outside the box and become a superhuman, where you can start teaching others how to do those things. And I think that it's really difficult if you're an entrepreneur and you are only, really, really great at product and not great at finance. Don't, don't, my advice is, don't rely on someone that knows how to do finance to do your finances.
Uh-huh.
If you are going to be a CEO, if you're going to grow your company, you have to have some level of understanding of finance and product and people and everything else
Mm-hmm.
in order to lead your team and then be able to learn more from them as you need them. But at the end of the day, if you know one or two or just three functions, that's going to be very challenging,
Yeah.
right? How are you going to collaborate well? How are you going to verify or validate someone else's work? How are you going to ask them great questions in order to push them to do more? Um, and have one-on-ones. Please, please. I can't stress this enough, is have meaningful one-on-ones with your team.
Okay.
This is so important. And I know I hadn't even mentioned it yet until this point, but this is key. There is no such thing as, oh, I see that person every day and I talk to them on Slack every day and so forth. That's great communication, but having a one-on-one, what did you do this week? Where are you blocked? How can I help? What's going well? What's not going well? You are now a mentor for every person on your team. And if you're not having those meaningful conversations, you don't, I'm sorry, but you don't know what's going on in your
Yes.
business.
Right.
So if that's not happening, go to one of my podcast episodes and look up the Accor CEO, Mr. O'Rourke, and he will tell you what he does with his executive global team for I don't know how many hotels he owns, but it's just I hear it all the time, and they're very, very special moments, and you get the most value out of your work when you do one-on-ones with when your team as you're growing. Understanding their needs and so forth is so important. You know, and I would say the third thing is give me a call.
Huh?
Get in touch,
Yes.
ask me questions. Would love to hear from you, from your listeners. I'm here to help and support, and yeah, I'm happy to do all of those things.
Oh, that's excellent. All right. Last question, Felicia.
Okay.
Success. What is your personal definition of success? And you can take that in any facet of your life or any direction you want, but how do you think of success for you?
Success in like business or success in life or anything.
Whatever you want, whatever you want. It's totally open. Your interpretation.
Well, I think they're not mutually exclusive,
Right.
right? If you're happy in your business, you're likely to be happy in your personal life. If you're happy in your personal life, you're likely to be happy in business.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that my definition of success, if I were to have one, is I mean, people talk about balance, but I'm not exactly sure if that's true. I mean, I would say, people who are highly successful in organizations, they actually don't have a great balance of personal life, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
But the time that they do spend in their personal life is extremely great quality time.
Yes.
And it's not about the quantity or how much time you spend with your family. It's really about how can you make the time that you do spend great quality time,
Uh-huh.
understanding what's in their world. And again, I think you get more support on a personal level if you're able to do that, in your personal life. And I would know. I've seen it firsthand. All of my cousins are entrepreneurs.
Uh-huh.
My father
Right.
was an entrepreneur. My husband's an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur, and I have, some of my cousins are a couple of billionaires, honestly, and I've seen, some of their personal lives just crumble,
Mm.
given what they have gone through. And so
Mhm.
I think that it's not about balance, it's about quality time, both in your business and in your personal life. And I think that if you can do that and you do that well and you're having humility, people will come to support you. And you do
Yeah.
need people to support you to be successful. Getting that support, whether it be with, in schools, your community, your family, your friends, your organization. Those are all different communities, and those are all opportunities for people to support you and for you to support others. And I think that the continuous learning that you can also get from others is also very important. And so the definition of success is, understanding, how you want to spend your time in a good quality. And if you can do that in multiple communities, and part of that quality time is learning from others and having humility, you will just be like a magnet of knowledge of an information because you're staying humble. You're wanting to learn. One of the things that I've always loved, this phrase is, I hope I never know everything. Because if you think that way, you
Right.
will never stop learning. And so I
Uh-huh.
hope I never know everything because, I truly do. I hope I never am the one that knows everything. It would, and if I continue that way of life, I will just be, awed by every step. I mean, I have twin 6-year-olds and they teach me every day.
I'm sure they do.
They do. And that's another place of, me being a mom of
Yeah.
always, and I'm just so impressed with them. They're always telling me, Mom, if you're feeling, upset, you should talk to that person. And I'm like, dang it. I'm like, she's
Wisdom.
right.
Yes.
Right? I'm like, oh, okay, fine. you know? So anyway, continuous learning and being humble and enjoy, every moment that you have. And I think that would be my definition of success.
That's perfect. Well, Felicia, this was absolutely fantastic. So thank you. Just absolutely thank you so much. And we will share all your contact info and how to get in touch and CPO Playbook, CPO Playbook podcast, all that stuff in the show notes so people can reach out and connect with you. But I think you added huge value. I know for sure to
Oh,
me, but to our listeners today. So Felicia, thank you. I mean, humbly, thank you so much for
oh.
sharing your wisdom and your thoughts and everything.
Well, thank you so much for having me and letting me share everything that we've been doing and up to and what's on my mind. And I don't get to have all of these conversations when I'm
Right.
on my show because I'm
Uh-huh.
always so interested in what everyone else is
Right.
talking about.
Yeah.
But this is so nice to be able to do this. Thank you for the invitation. And yes, I'm happy to support you any way I can too, Kip.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing yourself with us. So thanks, Felicia. Appreciate you.
My pleasure.
All right.